Alfred, tell me what I'm up against. It seems as though you're up against something of the more intergalactic variety. Again? Oh yeah, I get T-pose too. Ooh. Hello my friends, welcome back to Player Display. So, as promised, I had an old-style NECA Predator on the way in the mail, so we could do another good old-fashioned retrospective. This is the NECA Predator, Albino Predator, which was a Comic-Con exclusive from 2013, and I said they print that date right on there, so I don't have to search for the fine print later. And of course, since this is a retrospective, for those of you who don't know, that's when we review figures that are at least 10 years old, this one being much older than that. We're actually going to go into a lot more detail. So that being said, if you are looking at this Predator and you have no idea who the hell this is isn't actually from the comics, this isn't from a video game, this is, believe it or not, from a fan film that you could still watch today called Batman Dead End. It's precisely what you're expecting based on putting two and two together. It's like a 7 to 12 minute little film where Batman drops in Gotham. He has to tangle with the Joker for a little bit, but then their conversation is interrupted by xenomorphs and also a Predator. However, spoiler alert, not that it really matters, Batman prevails over the Predator because he's freaking Batman, and then at the very end we get a cliffhanger where three Predators approach Batman to do one final battle that is unfortunately never seen. That includes Wasp, Big Red Predator, who's displayed over here, and we're going to have to talk about him a little bit too, and then thirdly, Albino. And then unfortunately the film ends, and those Predators were never seen again, because it is just a fan film. But that being said, it's pretty insane that even though the film is not officially licensed and it's not canon, NECA was able to somehow produce official figures of those three main Predators. The reason why I never really bothered getting any of those three until now is for two reasons, really. Firstly, all of them are pretty damn expensive, even though this is the Comic-Con one and the others were mainline release. He's the most common and the most affordable. And second, part of me was holding out to maybe wait a bit, so that way they could come back to these and do the ultimate treatment. But from what I've been hearing from multiple sources, that seems very unlikely, mostly due to the fact that it's just weird how these existed at all, kind of as I mentioned, where they're made in a fan film that tied together two IPs that I don't believe at any point were under the same license. So as a result of that, since both Predator and DC were getting handed over and over between different studios and directors and things like that, it would just make a lot of sense as to who you could go up to and ask for rights to make these designs. So they're real oddballs, and chances are we'll never see them again. Like I mentioned, even though he was a con exclusive, Albino is the easiest to get. A little bit scalpy, sure, but honestly not too bad. As for Wasp, though, he's definitely way up there. He's a lot more difficult to get. He's done in kind of this yellow and black color scheme per his name. And he's a big old staff with a xenomorph head at the end of it. But then, of course, the big deal is Big Red, who is one of the holy grails of the NECA Predator chronology. The fun story with him is I thought I had him as a naive child when I was starting to collect, but there were some weird problems with him. His head kept falling off, and his wrist blades were in reverse. And even though it was a pretty decent figure, I attempted to sell him on eBay, which eventually I did, but not before someone called me out and let me know it was a bootleg. So I was never basking in the glory of an authentic Big Red Predator. Unfortunate, but now they're doing an actual samurai Predator from the Hunting Grounds game, which we are going to look at eventually. I don't know when that thing's going to release. It's been a while. All that being said, more trivia to come, but for now, let's start off with the main figure, mint in box, but you know me, I'm not a mint in box collector. This guy's coming right out of the shell, so we could talk about him. So here's the main figure in the old style carded packaging, which is highly nostalgic to me. As I mentioned before, my very first NECA Predator was the Lava Planet Predator from the Kenner Tribute subline of these. It was on this translucent red, and it was pretty cool, honestly. And here is the main figure itself. It displayed beautifully in the bubble because there's no cardboard around the outside, so the light shines in very beautifully. Then we got that
classic, although partways infamous Comic-Con sticker. If something has this, it means it's going to be quite rare, and likely most accessible on the third-party market where it's being scalped. Down here, just a photo shot of the figure itself, along with his name, and the Predator logo down there. And then over here, unfortunately, the only thing it has to tote about is new and improved articulation for the time, and unique shoulder armor, because this guy has absolutely no accessories. What you see is what you get. The reason for that is when you get to the back, you get to a bio, which I actually really love, because it expands on the backstory of a character who otherwise kind of just stands there. You barely even see him because he's very poorly lit, and he is wearing a biomask, so you don't actually see how albino he really is. But basically, as it says, he's part of the Big Red Predators clan of 3, and he runs around just punching things. He uses no weapons, plasma casters, so this art up here is erroneous, although it is very good art. I wonder if this was artwork done for this box specifically, or if this was done for the fan film. I think I'm more inclined to believe the latter, because he wouldn't have the plasma caster in the film, I'm guessing. I'd have to watch it again, it's been some time. But there's his backstory, and here are other figures that were released during that time. Again, Lava Planet Predator was my first. Unfortunately, I sold him. He was never a big favorite of mine, but he was a pretty cool goddamn figure. And then over here, I think we have 2 other Kenner tribute figures, although their names are not here, and I never owned them, so I couldn't tell you who they are. I'm actually going to do my best to open this carefully with, of course, the help of our friend Betsy over here, because I'd actually like to keep the card in the back, preserve it in a frame, because it's not so often where you get that original old-style packaging. So I'll see what I can do there, and then we'll have a look at the figure. Alright, first order of business, I managed to save the card overall. I got a little sloppy towards the bottom there, but everything else here, holy crap, look at this artwork. I really am digging this. I'm going to do my best to clean up the extra straggly plastic separately here, but I really love this artwork. It's a shame that it's so blocked up by the main figure in front of it. You can see the big old, well, big red helmet over there, and honestly, I would firmly believe this is just a shot of the actual action figure, as opposed to a piece from the set of Batman Dead End. I wouldn't put that past them. But yeah, I'm gonna clean this up and frame it. One of the issues with NECA when they were starting out with Predator and other lines at the time was quality control. They were notorious for accessories breaking, joints being frozen, over painting wrist joints so things wouldn't move. I had a lot of Predator figures from that era that fell apart, or I sold them just because they weren't holding up to par, or I took them apart for fodder. That's why I do not have many Predators from that original NECA generation in my collection anymore. Fortunately, that panned out for the better, because a lot of them were redone in the Ultimate style. But as for this albino here, I'm happy to report I've tested every single joint, and he moves beautifully, and also there's no accessories to look at, so we don't have to worry about quality issues there. So he's a perfectly intact figure, untouched by human hands. As I've said before, it's sometimes better to get an old NECA figure that has been handled by someone before, so they can let you know that all the joints work well before you get it. But in this case, I lucked out. I got the box for the artwork, and I have a perfectly intact figure, unless something goes wrong, but I think we're okay. Firstly, here is the head sculpt. Everything on this figure, except literally the shoulder pad, which is the one thing they had the gall to advertise on the card, is Jungle Hunter. As for the shoulder pad, it is City Hunter. But this head sculpt is more jungle-y, and it does really well. I mean, it's the same breed of this species, so it makes sense that it's the exact same thing. But of course, the main calling card of this Predator design is the fact that he has the albino mutation, which in my opinion makes for some very beautiful animals out in the wild. And once in a while we have a human with it, so that's pretty interesting. In the case of this OUTTA over here, he's not just flat white. That would be a very boring design. To the creators of Dead End's credit, they actually gave him a little bit of extra color despite him just having the albino mutation. In that, yeah, he is primarily done in white, but there are still color variations. Most notably, you have these hues of orange pigmentation throughout him. Like, that's where you get a secondary color on a typical OUTTA. Like, on a lot of them, you have the primary color in the front, They have a secondary color up here along the crest, and then down the arms, a little bit on the torso, just to do some shading. But for him, it looks less intentional and more modeled, as this mutation would, due to a OUTTA, supposedly. So, really interesting how they added to the lore in that way. This guy's canon to me, as far as I'm concerned. I really don't care. Batman did fight a Predator in the comics, and we will talk about that a little later towards size comparisons. As for the rest of the colors here, he has like this black motif going up him. It looks like he's got like an ivy tattoo or something. I don't understand how that could be a result of being an albino, but it looks really cool. That's fine. It adds some breakup. I do think it is quite beautiful. And it's kind of interesting if you like separate one half at a time. If he didn't have the black, you have a better idea of what he'd look like on both sides right here. If you mirror that over, if you cover up the white side, and he looks like that on both sides, he still looks pretty cool. But you get the best of both worlds. It's kind of a two-faced thing going on. As for the mandibles, expertly painted. This is the open version, where some figures have the closed one. This is open, which I definitely prefer for all my unmasked predators. So that's really great. And as you already saw, the albino paint job continues to these very glossy dreadlocks, which is totally fine. And they are all done up with these admittedly not as well painted or brown bands or whatever you want to call them. Like this one is definitely not that well painted. Again, old NECA, their paint wasn't quite perfect, but it was pretty damn good for the time. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. If you exclude like Hot Toys and all the high-end brands that were operating then, this was the queen of the crop, despite it having a few pitfalls. Moving on down to the torso, again, a lot of reuse, but that's fine. It's accurate to the film. You have the exposed torso, midriff, pecs, and all that. But contrarily to the modern Predator figures that we see, there is no articulation in here whatsoever. And honestly, I have no issue with that at all. You could say with the Ultimate figures, because they have articulation just below the pectorals, they have a little bit more movement. But even then, barely any at all by default. But then they have all this extra gear on top of that joint anyways, like all these bands and armor pads. So it doesn't make that much of a difference. I don't find myself using it very often. So in the case of this old style Jungle Hunter body, it's all streamlined, so we have an uninterrupted sculpt. And hopping ahead to articulation a little bit, there is a swivel down here at the waist, so he does have some movement. Although I do see some critique where he does feel perpetually arched back just a little bit. I have no issue with that. So sometimes just rolling back to old figures can really make your day, and you can get past some of the more primitive choices that were done that were good for that time, but by now might not be a good standard for other collectors. But for me, I have no issue with him being on the older side. Down to the arms, both are unique as per the traditional design. Over here, it's very tubular. You have one tube going from this pec armor into the shoulder, and then you have another cord going from this bicep armor down to his wrist gauntlet, which has his little beep boop pad to blow himself up or summon a ship, whatever he wants to do. But this one does not open. I have no issue with that. He never opened that in Dead End. And also, that piece, when it is done, can be very flimsy, and it's never happened to me, but I'm always afraid that it'll break. So, just an extra little thing I won't have to worry about. And all that's totally forgetting to mention the beautiful bronze copper paintwork that they did across all the armor. I really love what they did here. No real weathering to speak of, more so just like a black wash. There's no real scoring, but I do like it. Like you can see, it's a little heavy-handed down here, but I like that. Maybe he like fell around in like an oil spill or something, so I'm totally fine with that. The orange is very prevalent on both of his hands. Only two hands here, again, nothing interchangeable. But they're pretty well done for what they are. And on the insides, you have more of that gloving, which is very cool. These gloves are barely attached to him now that I'm looking at it. It's kind of just rags and are totally exposed along the top here, but whatever. It looks good. I wish they did something with the fingernails to make them more distinct. It just feels odd how they're white on the inside, then orange on the outside. You'd feel like they'd be a distinct color from everything else. If they'd be totally white, that would be better. Instead, they're kind of both. So those kind of disappear, but otherwise, not a big deal. On this side, of course, you get that shoulder pauldron that we talked before, which is carryover from the City Hunter they had at the time. More of this arm is exposed from shoulder down to elbow, but then of course you have his iconic wrist blade. And unfortunately, quality-wise, this is a one area where there's a slight issue, though nothing that can't be fixed. This wrist blade is quite stiff. That's as far out as I can get it. I feel like it should be able to go a little further, but then again, it is old-style NECA, so maybe that is the end of the story. Maybe it can't go more. I give it hot water, but I'm not sure if that would make much of a difference, but I'll think about it. And then as for this other hand, the other one was a little bit more splayed out. This one is more of an adequate grip or relaxed hand. It's kind of multi-purpose, so I do like it. Going back to this guy's bio of him running around using as little technology as possible, I do wish they would have at least given him alternate fist hands. They didn't do a lot of alternate hands with Predators at the time, but they definitely had the compatible molds where they could have given him interchangeable fists. No matter what you thought about the hands all being on ball joints for these early Predators, at least they were all interchangeable between all of them. So they could have done something there. I mean, they're interchangeable now, but they're on the pin hinge system, which is definitely preferable. But here, you could argue one of the perks is there's no chance of paint rub because there's no hinge to disrupt, which is an improvement. Not a ton more to explore with the legs. I totally neglected to mention, however, the fish netting that prevails throughout the thighs and also the torso. It does not extend to the arms or the feet, however, which is traditional, so that's totally fine. And even back then, I mean, it's not 100% perfect. There was little spots here and there, but they still managed to get that paint almost to a T. As a customizer, I have no idea how I would do this. For those of you who have never seen one of these older NECA Predators before, this is 100% raised. It's not printed in, which makes it all the more impressive. I mean, yeah, you do get bald spots like here. It gets a little bit scrappy, but overall, where it's most visible, you do see pretty consistent network, and it's very meticulously painted. I love that a lot. You also have this codpiece. I kind of hopped to the legs before I got to the codpiece, but it's kind of compiled with a little bit of suggested mixed media. It's all plastic, but you have some leathery elements here. Got a more armored codpiece here, which looks like a crustacean of some sort, which is highly possible. And that being said, one of the interesting things about this particular design is I'm seeing no evidence of any trophies on him. He doesn't have any skulls, he doesn't have any bones or spines or animals, or in the case of Bad Blood, severed heads are just split right down the middle. That's one of my favorite NECA Predators ever done. Top 3, top 5 probably. But yeah, it's interesting how he's so bare bones, and this guy survives just on paint apps alone, and if they did something wrong with that, there would be no reason to get him. But yeah, the fact that they succeeded so well with the paint in 2013 really does speak volumes to what we could expect later on in the future. Down here on the legs, knees, and the shins, I think those are all connected. Well, the knees are double jointed, and there they go. No, they're separated, my mistake. And that is an area where you could critique that the joint in there is a little miscolored from the black that's surrounding it, but that is so superficial that you're not going to be paying attention to that. Again, we're a continuation of that coppery paint going down here with a little bit of black wash to bring out some more of that sculpt. I love that a lot. And down to the feet, the trademark OUTTA sandals, which might vary from figure to figure, but in his case, they are just straight up sandals. I actually have gray back off to the side for some size comparisons. Some of these have no sandals at all. They're totally barefoot, so very interesting. But again, I would have wished that they painted in the toenails here in a distinct white, similarly to the hands. I think that would have been a nice little color to punch out. That's something I could do on my own, but if that's the only mod I'm doing, it's just not really that worth it. Otherwise, he's basically a perfect figure. I mean, given when you consider for the time that Predators didn't always come that stacked with accessories. If they did, it was maybe 1 or 2 on a good day, but sometimes they had absolutely nothing, and that's fine. I have no issues with this figure at all. I mean, you could always ask for more, but what we have here is seriously excellent. I love him a lot. And this is, of course, the original NECA Predator body. I mean, not counting, like, the movie Maniacs figures they did a little earlier on. So it is worth actually going ahead and talking about articulation, because this is all new to the channel. So let's start off at the head sculpt. Again, I've tested everything. Nothing is broken or stiff, so I can do this pretty freely. You have some swivel, which kind of tilts him up and down a little bit, which is fine. has a little bit of up, which is kind of great, and also very good down, and he probably has some tilt in there. Yeah, it's very good, especially for a classic Jungle Hunter Predator. Digging that a ton. Once more, nothing at all in the torso, but I don't have an issue with that. Shoulders, they have a hinge, they go down a little bit, but they get stuck in that armor there, so totally fine. You're not going to have his arms firm at his sides anyways. They go up as much as the armor will allow him to. On this one, not much, although you can probably peel the armor up a little bit if you're daring enough. Even then, the sculpt kind of locks there. And this one goes up further. So yeah, maybe if you move this, they could be up here and you could T-pose if you wanted him to for some reason. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Something I also wouldn't recommend with this specific style of Predator, because of that tube, is swivel. He has full swivel. I'm sure it could go 360, but if you did that, it would be, well, it would be at risk. You would definitely break that tube. I've done that in the past. Although I've noticed with the older style Predators, these tubes are a lot more resilient than on the Ultimate ones, so take that for what you will. Just an interesting little variation there. No bicep swivel. We did see that later on in the line, but not here. Though you do have an elbow swivel to make up for that, so it's not a big deal. And once again, more preserved sculpt to admire, which is also helped by the fact that he is an albino, and there's less colors to be thinking about, so I do like it for that reason too. The elbows crunch in, but they don't even reach 90. That is one of the biggest pitfalls of these original NECA Predators, but not a big deal in his case, because again, he just uses his hands, so it works for him in terms of his story. And they hinge back down straight, and they swivel and everything, so otherwise it's pretty stacked. As for the hands, on all these original Preds, they are on a ball joint, so they could spin, they can go a little ways in, little ways out, and also probably touch up, touch down, but doesn't go super far in either direction. So, not the worst thing, but again, if you had a hinged one, it could only go one way and not the other way. So here, it's kind of just a minor balance every way. So, whichever you prefer. Again, not a bad figure. Then down here on the legs, you have you can do a pretty good splits, especially with this half-floating armor, which is bound on the lower thigh here, so that is really nice. And then down here, you have a double-jointed knee, which is really great. That actually goes quite far. Then one day, they would translate that mechanic up here to the elbow, which is nice. I also forgot to mention, there is a thigh swivel, which goes much further than typical Predators would allow, so that is really great. And then down here, one thing that is unchanged is the feet are still, to this day, on ball joints, so they go back pretty alright, forward a lot more, so you could still be running around, walking, you'd be fine with that. And then, of course, you got some rocker, which is actually pretty solid, and then pretty good swivel. So, honestly, I like this figure more than I thought I would, because it's been so long since I've held one of the OG NECA Predators, and I was thinking, oh man, the articulation is going to be like that one huge grievance, but now that I've held him, honestly, it's held up better than I thought. He does pretty much everything that I need him to do. He has a partial gripping hand if you do really want to give him an accessory from an older or newer figure. So this guy's fine. I love him. He's great. One last note, as I was posing him up more successfully than I imagined, he actually looks great, is if you do want to kit him out with accessories, of course, you have that partial gripping hand as we discussed, but also on the back, since this is a Jungle Hunter mold, if you have a plasma caster from another figure that shares the exact same mold, and it has these tabs here, then you should be able to give him a plasma caster if you want. And here we are at size comparisons, where I'm going to flex things out a little more and attempt to do an amateur history of the NECA Predator. So again, I started collecting, I think in 2012 when I was 12. Kind of useful being born in 1999, you can count it precisely. But back then is when the NECA Predator line was first getting off its feet. The original Predator action figure line was actually held by Kenner in the late 90s, and we got some really interesting designs from that era, but unfortunately Kenner went down the tubes very sadly and got liquidated, so it took some years, but then NECA picked up the license and they started releasing their own line, and they made some very interesting choices. They tapped into Kenner tributes, taking those original figures and modernizing them, and then they also went on this other tangent over here, which is the NES Jungle Hunter Predator as he appeared in the original Predator video game, but all done in blue with some cel shading. He's definitely one of my favorites. One thing that's interesting to mention, actually we'll bring in albino again here, is if we put their arms forms back together. They were made during the exact same era, and they are made on pretty much the exact same sculpt, almost 100%. But you'll notice how much further the NES Predator's blades come out, whereas albinos are a little bit more stubby. They don't come out a lot further. I feel like the blades are the same mold as well, so I don't know why these are a little stuck. Honestly, I don't think I'll even bother trying to give him heat. I think he's fine. I don't need him to go out any further than that. So not a big deal for me, but it's just another thing worth mentioning in terms of the quality. And also back to this Jungle Hunter, his legs are very, very floppy, so he's always been difficult to stand. Another sign of NECA's early QC problems, which fortunately Albino does not have despite being done on the exact same body. Then what I'd argue is the biggest turning point for this line is when they shifted to focusing on the Aliens versus Predator figures. And this is where we got the three brothers being Chopper, Celtic, and who I have here, Unmasked Scar, who is one of my favorite Predators of all time as far as the movies are concerned. And the most important thing about these guys, aside from them having all new sculpt and also being way taller than the typical Predator as they're supposed to be and very swole, is the fact that they have double jointed elbows and a joint in the torso, which again you can't do much with because it's so bulky, but the fact that the joint is there at all would be a game changer going forward. But those elbows are a huge deal, especially when they're getting all these crazy weapons, these massive ass wrist blades. Those elbows are very important to the Predator line. So this is where it first hit, and then from there on out, they would be a mainstay. They wouldn't go back to the single jointed elbows ever again, as far as I know. But the world we're living in now, fortunately for the better, is the Ultimate style figures. When that treatment finally came along, of course, an Ultimate NECA figure is when they do a standard typical figure as they've been doing in the past, but with the most superior articulation elements, the best paintwork they've ever done, and a smorgasbord of accessories. Increases the price, but it's totally justified. And also you get a really good bios for characters who otherwise had none, kind of similar to what they did with Albino over here. This is the latest edition of Greyback, one of my favorite NECA figures ever done, and this is just one of his accessories, his skull trophy. He came with an extra skull without the spine. He came with 2 alternate masks, one with an LED feature. He came with a ton of crap. He is one of the most loaded figures that NECA's ever done for the Predators. And of course, he's got the trademark Adolini pistol, and you gotta love that. You can't have Greyback without it. So, yeah, interesting little evolution. Although this is just a generalized one wave, second wave, third wave of how the Predators have evolved, no pun intended, over NECA's history, but there are still some little offshoot lines in there, and that is what makes the next size comparison so interesting. But like I said, at least as far as I'm concerned, Batman did canonically fight Xenomorphs and the OUTTA, and that was in a number of scattered comics during, I think, the mid-2010s, early 2010s, I don't exactly know 100%. And because the licensing for Predator was so ambiguous, there was this brief window in time when Dark Horse was producing comics, and somehow they found a way to merge DC characters with Predators and Aliens. Therefore, these 3 wacky-ass characters that we have here, they released 4 2-packs of figures at the Comic-Cons. Firstly, we have, I brought him out several times before in these videos, my favorite Batman figure of all time being NECA's Batman as he appears in those Batman vs. Predator / versus Alien comics, and he had to be highly modified. The legs were practically frozen or super loose. I don't remember which it was. I had to repair that in the codpiece. The cape was extremely raggedy. I replaced that completely with a wire substitute, and also gave him glow-in-the-dark eyes, so he is wicked awesome. Doesn't have a ton of accessories, but I do love him to death. Perfect Batman for me. But then things get even more wacky. He didn't come in the same pack as him. He actually came with a Hal Jordan / John Stewart Green Lantern, because he had 2 head sculpts. But this one is the Yellow Lantern Predator, which did actually show up in the comics very briefly, but he is a canonical character. And then the most weird of all of these is absolutely the Joker Xenomorph, which is the figure that did come with this Batman. And this is something of a merge between the original Big Chap and Warrior molds kind of slammed together, because he's got the Big Chap head, but Warrior claws and arms, so he's kind of a hodgepodge. And this is not an actual character, as far as I'm concerned. This is a cover recreation on one of the covers of those comics. It was just the face of this xenomorph with the green dome, and then the red painted lips, because sure, why not? Obviously, we gotta end things off with Star Wars: The Black Series Quash and Muckabuck!
We're old friends, members of this channel remember that we're old friends.
It's very, very easy to just write this figure off as a simple repaint, a little bit of a cash grab, especially because there's no accessories with him. This is a figure that you could definitely disregard and never think about ever again, but for me, he really does hit a special place in my heart for a number of reasons. I mean, firstly, he was from the original lines of these NECA figures, which is, again, how my collecting journey and the hole in my wallet got started. So it is highly nostalgic for me to have this figure. It might not have the same sentiment to others as it does to me, but for me, he is very special, despite the fact that he has more early articulation and he doesn't have any accessories at all. But I'm totally alright with that. And second, I also love the fact that he tangled with Batman, supposedly. We never actually saw them come to blows. It was, again, a cliffhanger at the end there. But it's still just a fun idea, and it will be cool to get him on the shelves with this version of Batman specifically. That being said, do I plan on collecting the other members of his 3-member tribe, being Wasp and Big Red? I don't know, because those are very expensive. Big Red especially. I don't know. They're both great figures, but they might be just a little bit more than like bigger of a pill than I can swallow. This guy, I'm totally okay with just having him as a standalone, like just as a fun fact type of character. Like, hey, this Predator, he fought Batman at one point. And then, I don't know, maybe I can create my own Trinity here. Like, we have, like 2 DC characters over here, and the Yellow Lantern Predator, and then the Joker Xenomorph. So maybe that could be an interesting little team. Like, the Joker Predator's a little smarter than average, and he's kind of the pet of the group. So I don't know. I mean, that's the fun thing about toys. You don't always have to be consistent. You don't always have to feel obligated to collect all the members of a team or of a wave. You can mix and change, and you can create what ifs. You can dream a little bit. That's what toys are meant for. They're not about completing a collection. They're not about spinning them for profit. Todd McFarlane, I'm talking to you. They're about the fun. They're about opening these boxes, getting these nice quality figures, and just wondering and thinking about how these characters would interact with other characters, who you could match them up with, and the fact that we have a Predator here that has lineage to DC, more or less. I mean, that was done by fan intervention, of course. That alone is enough for me to say, you've got full freedom here. I know that sounds wicked cheesy. It sounds like I'm talking to a whole bunch of children, but if you're collecting toys, then you're a child at heart, and that is good. That you still have that imaginative edge in you. And that's really what this figure brings out of me. Just remembering those old times, not knowing a lot about Predator yet, not knowing a lot about action figure collecting, not even knowing much about NECA at all. This just kind of helps to remember my grassroots, like barely having any money to my name. Granted, I still barely have any money to my name, but, you know, just scrambling up enough quarters to get one of these and having that joy of, like, I got a Predator now. Now I can join my other one Predator. Like, you know, when I had, like, very, very few. And it's okay to have few, but just looking back, it's a very nostalgic time before high school and all that. So yeah, it was different. All nostalgia aside, this is, I think, objectively a very great figure. I think he still holds up. I mean, you could critique the fact that he doesn't have double jointed elbows, but like I said, per his bio, he's not supposed to have a whole ton of weapons. He's supposed to be a brawler. I imagine him running around like Doomslayer style, just punching things, stabbing things, and just not getting hurt, like Berserker style almost. most. I really like the story. I love the look, the paint. Everything about this guy is great. I'm not even bugged that he doesn't have accessories. And also, he was a con exclusive, so I guess he wasn't obligated to be totally stacked. I really like him. I still find it weird that the Comic-Con exclusive of the three Dead End Predators is the most easy to find and the cheapest. So that being said, if you want him and you like him per what I've discussed in this review, you can totally get him. There's a lot of him. The price is pretty streamlined across all the listings on the third-party market, and I think you can safely say if you get a mint in box, you probably won't have to worry about QC issues, so you'd be fine in that regard. Otherwise, again, I see why it could also be skippable. He's not essential to everyone. People could also be bugged by the fact that you can't get the other two members of his team. But again, as a standalone, to mix and match with other figures you already have, he can really be a blast, so I'm looking forward to see what I can do. So all that being said, I think I've rambled quite enough, but it's a retrospective, so I like to give myself a little bit more leeway to ramble on. But with all that out of the way, if you enjoyed this little retrospective, then please, as per usual, be sure to
Like!
Comment.
Ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals. And subscribe.
It really doesn't matter if you're Mr. Black or Albino White. Rock on, and I will see you all later.
Hey, you! Yeah, you! Check out this other video you might like in our sister gaming channel. It would be real sweet if you did. Still waiting!